Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start, and this today is the first of 3 workshops in a row about the subject of memory. And I don't expect you to actually answer me on this, I just want you to think about it. But if I ask you, how is your memory? How do you remember things? Do you remember well or not? A lot of people tell me, terrible memory, I can't remember anything. You know, the answer to that question is everybody in here has a fantastic memory. Even if you think you don't. It's just that some people don't know how to actually apply it to school-related things. I talk to people all the time who say they can't remember anything. So they read their book, I have no idea, I can't remember. And then I ask them what their favorite hobby is, and a lot of people say, music, love music. And so I have them tell me their favorite artist. They tell me, and I say, do you remember the lyrics to their songs? Every one of them, they say. And they're able to give me this long list of lyrics that they have memorized. And then when they're done, I say, that's really good. You have a great memory. They say, no, it's terrible. I say, yeah, but you remember all that. And they say, well, that's different. Okay, so we got to figure out how to get that knowledge, that memory that you have for other things applied to school. And that's what I'm going to teach you. So today's workshop is called How to Remember for Tests. Next week is Memory Tricks, and the other one after that is More Memory Tricks. So it's kind of a 3-part series. If you're only here for this one, you'll get some things that I hope are helpful. If you're here for all 3, of course, which I would love, then you'll get a whole bunch of teaching about memory, and you'll find out that your memory can work better than you think it can. Okay? So to start today, what we're going to do is I'm going to test your memory, because that's what this is all about memory. So what I'd like everybody to do is to make sure that you have some paper in front of you, which I think everybody does, and to have your pen or pencil kind of ready. But what I'm going to ask you to do is to go ahead and do something I rarely ask, and that is to put your pen or your pencil down. I actually don't want it in your hands at all for the next couple of minutes. I am going to do what I call the 16 card activity, and I want to make sure everybody can see these. I think you'll be able to, but what I'm going to do in just a minute is I'm going to show you a word on a card, and I'll sort of rotate it and I'll say it out loud, and then I'll go to the next word and the next word, and I'm going to end up showing you 16 words. By the time I'm done, you're going to think it was like 40, but it's only 16. And I want you to try to memorize them all, which is easy for me to say, not so easy for you to do. But here's the little trick to this. As soon as I have shown you the last word, I'm going to say the magic word, which is okay. And as soon as I say okay, hurry, grab your pen or pencil, and write down as many of these words as you can remember before you forget them. And you don't have to write them in order, just whatever's in there, hurry and write it down, and then I'll explain what all of this is about, okay? So that's the goal of this, and again, I want you to just sort of stay quiet and concentrate, and I'll go through them pretty quickly. Also, if somebody comes in while we're doing this, this is a concentration exercise, ignore them. And keep focusing, okay, because it's easy to just watch them walk in and then you forget all the words. So hopefully we won't have anybody, but if they do, just try to ignore them the best you can, okay? What's the first word? Pen. Yeah, if you forget that one, there's no hope for you, right? I'm showing you that like 20 times. The other words you're only going to see once, so that's a lot tougher. Okay, so here we go. Pen. Just stay quiet. Love. Toast. Stay. Basket, pain, restaurant, ask, notebook, find, table, went, teacher, hungry, no, dog. Okay. Okay, time's up. Now, the reason that I know that time is up is because I look around and what do I see? Yeah, nobody's moving. That's how I know. I look around, and all of you just a minute ago, and you didn't know you did this, you fulfill one of my greatest dreams as a teacher. So isn't that nice? And that is, as soon as I said okay, you moved faster than I've ever seen anybody move, and you started writing, and you were doing it like this, really fast, and I looked around, and knowledge was just flowing out of you. That's like a teacher's greatest dream. But the problem is that lasts for no more than about 30 seconds, and then people are starting to slow down, the frown is coming out, and after about 1 minute, I look around and almost everybody is basically done. Whatever you could remember is there, and whatever you lost is gone forever, okay? If you did this, don't get embarrassed, because I see this all the time. I saw several of you do this. I'm looking around thinking, are we done? And I see some people doing this. And when you're counting the number of words, that basically means you're waving the white flag like I'm done, and I'm hoping my list isn't too embarrassingly small. Well, if you remembered a lot, that's great. If you remembered only a little, that's okay. But what we're going to do to try to sort of apply this to you in school is I'm going to correct this with you. And I want you to look at your list of words, no matter how short or long it was, and here's what we're going to do. I'm going to read a list of some of the words that I showed you on those cards, and every one of these words that I say, if you look and you see it on the list, meaning you remembered it, I want you to put the number 1 next to it. If you didn't remember it, if it's not there, don't write it now, right? Too late, you had your chance before. So the first one is pen. So if you remembered that, put a 1. If not, don't do anything. Next one is love. Toast. And again, these are 1s. Stay. Teacher. Hungry. No. And dog. Okay, so those are the 1s, and I'll tell you what that means in a minute. I'm going to go back over another list of other words I showed you as part of the exercise, and any of these that you have on your paper, go ahead and put a 2 next to it. All right, so the first one is basket. So if you remember that, 2. If not, nothing. Pain. Restaurant. Ask. Notebook. And again, these are 2s. Find, table, and went. Okay? Now, see how good your memory is. How many words were there altogether? 16? Okay, well, there were actually 8 words in group 1 and 8 in group 2. So that means that's it. All right? So what that means is if you look at your list now, and you have any word that does not have a 1 or a 2 next to it, what does that mean? It's wrong. Yeah, it means you made up a nice word. It wasn't one of mine. And people say, I could have sworn it was on there. If you have any word without a number next to it, good try, cross it out, and then I want you to do your math for the day. And that is, I want you to go down your list and count how many 1s did you remember. And I want you to put that like something like this. Maybe you remembered 5 or 7 or 4, whatever. And then I want you to count how many 2s did you remember, and put that down also. That's going to be kind of the basis of my teaching for the next 20 minutes or so. Okay, so quick question, just a show of hands. How many of you ended up with a higher score, meaning you remembered more of the 1s? Let me see, show of hands. Okay, most people. How about a tie? That happens pretty often. Okay, and then did anybody remember more 2s? Sometimes I might get 1. Okay, if you think about this, almost everybody said more 1s. That makes no sense because there were the same number of words in both. So that means half of you should have remembered more of these and half should have remembered more of these. But it never works that way. So that means there's something about these that tends to make them stick better for most people. What is that? Well, here's the first principle of the day, and that is whenever you are trying to learn something by reading it in a textbook or hearing it from a teacher, something will happen in your brain, and that's this. The first, or group number 1 was made up of the first 4 words that I showed you on the cards and the last 4. So that was group 1. So what does that make group 2 then? The middle, right? That's the only thing that's left. So the principle is that when you're trying to learn something, you will almost always remember a lot from the beginning and a lot from the end, and not too much from the middle. This is the big problem for memory. Those of you, I think there were 3 of you who raised your hand saying you had a tie. I'm almost positive that if I had shown you 20 or 25 or 30 words, so it was longer, you would have come over to this side, because that's just the way the brain tends to work. And so if all I did was teach that to you and then we moved on to something else, you'd think, okay, well, I learned something. But that's not what I want to do. I want that fact, that the way that the brain works, to change the way you read textbooks for the rest of your college career. And that's what I'm going to be teaching right now. So most students tell me that one of the hardest things that they have to do as college students is to read their textbooks. Anybody can read them, but to actually remember what you read is hard, okay, especially when it's a very difficult book. So everything that I'm going to explain for these next minutes is going to be about only one activity, and that's textbook reading. It does not apply to reviewing, to studying your flashcards, to going over your notes. That's different than this. This is the hard work of trying to concentrate on your reading, okay? And what we're going to do to kind of learn a little lesson here, hopefully, is we're going to look at 2 students who are both good students who try hard and who want to do well. So they're kind of like a clone of the other one. But student number 1 does some things when they read that make them forget almost everything. Student number 2 does some things that help them remember almost everything. So again, we want to figure out, what is that? Like, what's the secret? Okay, so almost every number that I put up here while I teach this is going to be minutes. So it's kind of good to kind of keep that in mind. So here's what we say about student number 1. Again, tries really hard, but has a problem. They sit at home or in the library for 90 minutes and they read. 90 minutes straight, so that's an hour and a half. Kind of a long time to read, but people do that all the time. So what we're going to say, and I'm going to ask for a little help from you, and I want to get some participation on this. The first 10 minutes out of the 90 should actually be very good for this person's memory. In other words, they're going to remember a lot of what they read during that time. Why would a person remember a lot from the beginning? Besides the fact that it's the beginning.
It's most basic.
It can be the most basic sometimes. What kind of energy level do you have when you start reading compared to later? Well, hopefully you're at your best when you start. You could be tired when you open up a textbook, but half hour from now, you're going to be ready to fall asleep. So you're at your best. And also, this is kind of sad to say, you're not bored yet. Not that textbooks are always boring, but you know how that goes. And so when you open up the book and you lean forward and you concentrate, everything is really good for a few minutes. And so you're going to remember a lot of what you read. Now, here's the mystery of the day. So again, I want you to try to figure this one out. The last 10 minutes should be the worst minutes because you're exhausted by then, but these are actually among the best minutes. So why would the last minutes of reading stick in your brain better? Yeah, and you also know by then that you're almost finished. I don't know if you do this. Whenever I show this to students, most people look at me like, oh my gosh. They thought they were the only one who did this, but most people do it. When I was in college, I would open up a textbook and start reading. And I would read for about 10 minutes, and then I would stop and do this. And see how many pages were left. And it was always a lot. I thought, oh God. Then I'd read for about 3 more minutes. And it was like I was climbing a mountain. Like, when am I ever going to get done? But when I finally checked for like the 10th time and I realized, wait a minute, a couple pages, I'm almost done. I could have been ready to fall asleep. All of a sudden, I get a shot of adrenaline, extra energy, because I know just a few more minutes, I'm done. And so then I start concentrating, and then it sticks better, right? So all good. Well, how much time does that leave in the middle? 70. So you didn't know this was a math workshop, but it is. What happens during this time? Bad things. Okay, this is where your mind Wanders all over the place. You're there, you're gone, you're there, you're gone. Are you going to remember a lot of what you read during this time? No, because you're not focused as well as you should be. So that means this person who, again, is trying really hard ends up having about 20 minutes that are good for their memory, beginning and end, and then 70 minutes that are bad. And that's a pretty sad use of their time. Okay? So what does student number 2 do that makes them remember way more? Well, they do this. They do 3 things, 3 habits. The first one is the most obvious. This number is way, way too big. Unless you're a very unusual type of person, our ability to concentrate doesn't last 90 minutes. Sometimes it doesn't last 90 seconds. You know, we have a hard time. So what I'm going to suggest is that rather than reading for 90 minutes, that you read for no more than about 30 at one time or at one sitting. It doesn't mean 30 minutes a day, because sometimes people have a lot more reading to do than that, but it's at one time. Now, if I gave you a choice to sit down and read a textbook for 90 minutes or 30, what would you pick? Yeah, if you say 90, that's impressive, but most people say, this sounds so much better. 90 minutes, just thinking about that sounds exhausting. 30 minutes is like a little sprint, so even if you don't like the reading, you can hang in there for 30 minutes just fine. Well, we're going to put the same 2 numbers here, and then what do we have in the middle now? 10. And you're going to see a whole lot of 10s coming up here in the next few minutes. So first thing to do, shorten way up on the reading till around 30 minutes. The second habit that this person follows that helps them involves the number 5. And that's 5 minutes. But what's the 5 minutes for?
Break.
Yeah, it's for break. Right? I ask students all the time, and this is kind of a funny question for me to ask. I say, when you're reading, you have a lot of reading to do you take regular 5-minute breaks? And you know what most students say? They say, no, I don't. And I say, well, what do you do? And some people say, I prefer the 3 to 4 hour break or the wait till tomorrow break. And I say, yeah, I know, I get it. And you know why some people do this? They know themselves, and they know that once they get up, they're never coming back. They just kind of know that, so that's why they sit there, and it's like they put their seatbelt on and say, I'm going to just sit here until I'm done. So they put in the time, but look what happens. Not good, okay? So 5-minute break, and I'm not going to get into this all that much just for the sake of time today, but one of the things that I think is really smart for a student to do during a 5-minute break when they're going to come back and read some more is to stretch. So in addition to using the restroom and getting a quick little snack or something to drink, something like that, it's a really good idea to stretch, and here's why. You know as well as I do that sitting and trying to read a textbook is hard work, just trying to concentrate and stay awake. And so what happens to most people as they're reading is that their eyes might start getting kind of sore or tired, right? But usually some other part of their body starts to ache or get sore as well. Could be the neck, back, shoulders. I've had even some people say, ooh, boy, my butt just starts hurting, and I think, wow, how are you sitting? But anyway, everybody's different. You know, when you're feeling fine, it's hard to concentrate on reading. When you have an ache or a pain, you start thinking only about the ache and the pain. So if you sat there for 30 minutes and you're leaning over and reading, and a pain started to develop right here, and then the 30 minutes ended and you said, okay, break time, and you put the book aside and you grabbed, let's say, a newspaper or a magazine, and you just sat and read for 5 minutes, well, that's a break. But what's going to happen to this while you're doing that? Probably nothing. It's going to stay there, and then when you start reading again, it's going to get worse and worse, and pretty soon that's all you're going to be thinking about, and you lose your focus. So after you've used the restroom, gotten something to drink or whatever, right before you sit back down, it's good to stand there and just kind of move around a little and try to sense what might be a little sore and just kind of exercise it a little. This isn't an aerobic workout or anything else. You could do that some other time, but just for a minute, kind of stretch it out. Then when you sit down, you should be back almost to normal and then be able to concentrate better. So I think this is helpful. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you about related to this is, what should you not do during a 5-minute break? You're going to come back and you're going to read here. So what would be a mistake? Eat is possible, depending. What else? TV. You know what, and I don't want you answering this because this is a personal thing, but here's what I want you to think about. What is there in your house or apartment that draws you to it like a magnet? And once you start doing it, you lose all track of time. Everybody has something different. For some people, it's the TV. For some people, it's the computer. For some people, it's this. I don't know if you've ever done this before. It's a really dumb thing, and I used to do this in the beginning of college. I'd say this. I have a 5-minute break. What am I going to do? Let me just rest my eyes for 5 minutes, and then I'll start reading again. And then an hour later, wake up from my nap and then go to bed. Bad idea. Telephone is another thing. Sometimes if somebody loves the telephone, once they get on there, an hour can pass in like 2 minutes. I've had people say, I'm going to just go on and just check my email and look at my Facebook page just for 5 minutes. And then an hour later, they're still clicking. So you know what it is for you that would kind of do that. So during the 5 minutes, you don't go anywhere near that. So if it's the TV or the computer, you just kind of do this and you back away, because otherwise, once you start, you're not going to come back. Okay? So break. That's the second one. I'm going to finish this out, and then I'm going to show you the third habit. The person reads for 30, 5-minute break, reads for 30, 5-minute break, reads for 30 more. So that's just their routine that they're following. Okay, and so I'm going to draw a strange circle here. Okay, and I want you to look inside the circle. After all this time, how much time has student number 2 spent reading? Yeah, 90 minutes, right? The same as this person. It's actually taken them 10 extra minutes due to the breaks, but 90 minutes of reading. Beginning is good, end is good. So that's a total for this person of 60 minutes that are good. And then how much bad? 30, right? So the middle part. So just by doing those two things, the person goes from this to this, which is huge improvement. And people who try this often come back to me, and you know what they say? They say, my memory's improving. And you know what I tell them? I say, no, it's not. It's the same exact memory you had before. You're just using it better, and it's actually working better for you. It's not that your memory improves, it's just a smarter way to go about it. Okay, so I've had students tell me, if middle is bad, what can we do to cut the middle out? You know, you don't want bad stuff, so cut it out. Let's just have a beginning and end, and then we'll remember everything. There has to be a middle. But by doing this, the middle shrinks. This is a huge middle here. That's a big problem. So this fixes that. But I want to show you one other thing. This is habit number 3 that this student does. And it involves something I mentioned a little while ago. And that's this. So this is, again, student number 2. I told you that it's a good idea to read for 30 minutes, a lot better than 90. So I still, stand by that. But I'm going to change it a little. So not to confuse you. It's a good idea to spend about 25 minutes reading, and then the third habit that this student does is right there. So what would come there? What would be a good thing for them to do right here?
Summary.
Break. Well, a lot of people, whenever I ask any question, they say break. Break, right? I'll take a break. The break actually comes here after the half hour. So what comes here is, what do most students do when they finish reading something in their book? They close it. Why do they close it? Because they're done. And usually they have a smile on their face or relief. They're going, yes. And then as they walk away, every step they take, what happens? It starts leaking away, like some of those words did when you thought you had them all and then they just vanished somewhere. Like, what happened? So the best thing to do, which is requiring a new little habit for some of you, is to always take a couple of minutes to review before you get up and take your break. If you did these two in reverse order, that would be better than not reviewing at all. But even in those 5 minutes, you're going to lose a lot, and you're trying to hold it in there so that it kind of goes from your short-term to your long-term memory. Now, again, what was the first word that I showed you on those cards? pen. And you remember that, and you'll probably remember that for a while because you saw it a lot. Okay, the other words you only saw once, and usually for your memory, once is not enough. You need repetition. So I want you to kind of think of this for a second. If, let me go ahead and start this with you too. If I had done this instead, if I had held up all of these cards and I went through them the exact same way that I just did, and then when I was done, I didn't let you write them. I went through all of them again. And then I went through all of them again, 3 times. And then I asked you to write, I know everybody here would have remembered more. A few words more, or maybe a lot more, because when you see things repeated, it helps. So one of the things you can do is after you're done reading, go back to the first page you just read during those 25 minutes, and then quickly skim down the columns, look at the bold print headings and the bold print words and all of the basic important things, not study them hard, just look at them again. And when you look at things again right after you've learned them, they stick better. And so that's one of the main reasons why this immediate review helps. Now, even if a person does all 3 of those things, it doesn't mean they're going to remember everything. But it helps a lot over just sitting and reading and then getting up afterward and wondering, why can't I remember anything that I just read? Okay? Anybody have any question about any of this? Okay. The next thing that I want to talk about is something that some of you in here are having to struggle with this semester. Others maybe not, but you will probably next semester. And that has to do with vocabulary or definitions. What I always tell students is that if you're in a class in college that ends with ology, you're going to have a lot of vocabulary to learn. So psychology, biology, sociology, they almost have their own language, so there's a lot of vocabulary. Even other classes, you would as well. Well, one of the things that I've discovered over the years of teaching is that most students, when they have a big set of definitions to learn, they do it the wrong way. They think it's the right way, but then when they get to the test, bad things happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put down a definition on the board, and I'm going to use that as an example in just a minute of something. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this word. Some people usually are, and some haven't really heard of it before. But I'm going to just copy here the definition of this word, and then, as I said, I'm going to use this in a second. Okay, now if you had this definition to memorize for a test, just that one, you could learn that in 1 minute or less and you'd be done. But if you had 30 or 50 or 100 definitions to learn, what do most people use to learn definitions? Flashcards. So they run for the cards and they write the word and the definition, get a stack of them, and then go around all day testing themselves. That's a good way to study, except here's what happens. I'm going to show you briefly the wrong way that most people try to learn definitions, and then I'm going to teach you the better way that almost always leads to better understanding and better grades. Okay, so that's kind of how we're going to go with this. So the wrong way that most people try to learn definitions is this way. And I think some of you, when you see this, you're going to think, that's the wrong way? I thought that was the right way. So here's what it is. Word for word. Okay, and so what I mean by that is this. When a student has their stack of flashcards that they made, and they look at a word, and then they say the definition out loud, and then they check and see that they got it exactly right, they assume that they know it, and they put it in the done pile, you know, got that one, and they work through their cards that way. That all sounds good, except what do teachers do a lot on tests that would make that not work at all?
They reword the definition.
Yes, they change the wording around all the time. Do they do that to torture you? Some people say, yes, that's exactly why. But it's actually to see if you know what it means. Wow, what an interesting idea. So if you memorize the card and you've got the words and you can say them anytime, night or day, people think, ready for that one. And then if the teacher changes the way it's worded, you're lost, like you never learned it in the beginning. So this doesn't work, okay? The better way involves 4 steps. And I know that you'd rather have 1 step than 4, but if you want to learn the material, this is what you need to do. First step in the better way, this will confuse everybody for a minute. That's step 1. Okay, and I've had people say, well, make up your mind. Is that the wrong way or is that the right way? And the answer is sort of both. Whenever you have a definition you have to memorize, the first thing you have to do is cram the definition in your head. You have to learn it word for word, okay? But if that's all you do and then stop, that's where problems come in. So this is a necessary first step, but it's only a first step. So for these other 3 steps, I'm going to start to show you something related to this. I don't know what it is about me. Sometimes I look around, see if I have a sign on me, but students come up to me all the time and say, could you test me on my vocabulary? I have a test coming up, and they want me to test them. And I say, okay, when's your test? And sometimes they say, 20 minutes. And I just say, get out of here. I just say, there's nothing I can do for you now. You either know it or you don't. But if they say it's next week or it's in 3 days, I say, okay, give me your cards. They give me the cards, and then this is what happens. I say, your first word is tariff. And they get this look in their eyes that people always get when they're trying to spit back something that they've memorized. It's kind of like this glassy-eyed look. And they say, tariff is a system of duties on imports and exports. And then they look at me and I say, perfect. And they say, yes. All right, let's go on to the next one. And I say, well, wait a minute. Before we go to the next one, could you do me a favor? Could you tell me what tariff means? And they say, I just did. And you said I got it right. Come on, I don't have much time here. I said, no, but what does it mean? And they say, I just told you. And so I say, okay, stop. And so I do this. I say, do you see this word right here? And they look at that word like it's the first time they've ever seen it in their life, even though they just said it to me like 20 seconds ago. I said, what does that word mean? And they say, I don't know, that's a good question. I said, yeah, it's kind of a good question. What do you think duties means? They say, well, it means you're like your job, like your responsibilities. Those are your duties. And I said, okay, I'm glad you said that. It's wrong, but I'm glad you said that. In the English language, probably 90% of the time or more, when you see this word in a sentence, that's what it means. Your duties, your job, your responsibilities. But in this case, that's not what it means at all. Anybody know what this means here? Yes, this is a type of tax. Is it important for you to know that before you take the test on this? Yes, because if you get a really easy teacher, you might get lucky. The teacher might say, a tariff is, and then this is one of the choices. So if you memorize the card, you got it. But teachers don't do that very often. Instead, the teacher might say something like this, which of the following is a type of tax? And they give this as one of the choices. And you look at it and you think, ooh, a type of tax. I'm not really sure I know that, but I know it's not tariff because tariff is a system of duties on imports and exports. In other words, you've got that definition in there, but where does it say tax? Nowhere. So all they had to do is change it a little and you are like in a dark room trying to find the light switch. You're just lost. So how do you fix that so that that won't happen? Well, here's what you do. This seems really obvious, but most people don't ever do this, and that is to know the meaning. And by this, I don't mean know the meaning of the definition. It's actually more. It's this. Know the meaning of each word in the definition. Okay, and so that may require you. Yeah, actually it is. Sorry, we'll be done in just a few minutes, so maybe next time. Okay. If you look at all the words in the definition and you think, I'm positive I know the meaning of every one of those, then you don't have to do this. But if you look at one of the words in there and you're thinking, I'm not even positive what that means, you need to look it up. You look it up in a dictionary. You look it up on dictionary.com if you have a laptop or any kind of computer, and you find out the meaning. Okay? And then for these two, number 3 and 4, there is a word that I would love to have you remember. It's not a very interesting word, but it has great power to it when you use it the way that I'm going to show you. This is my great power word. It's the word and. That doesn't seem very powerful, but it becomes powerful when you do this. and that is you put a question mark after it. So here's the way this looks. Okay, this person says to me, tariff is a system of duties on imports and exports. The next word out of my mouth is, and? And if they look at me like a lot of students have and say, and what? Then you know what that means? That means, don't ask me anything else. I'm just proud I know that. That's a bad sign, right? What do I want them to be able to do when I say, and? I want them to be able to say this. That means it's a kind of tax on what comes in or out of a country. In other words, the same thing, but in their own words. I think you know this, but if you can't explain something clearly in your own words, what does that mean? It means you don't know it. You may say, oh no, but I know it. No, you don't. If you can't explain it, then something is stuck in your understanding. And so what you do is this. You work for 1 minute, for 10 minutes, however long it takes, until you can restate the definition in your own words. Okay, until you can do that, you are not ready for the test on that material. And so that's why you need to know the meaning of each word in there, and then you try to figure out how would I say this or explain it in my own words. Once a person does that, once they say that means it's a type of tax on what comes in or out of the country, the next word out of my mouth is and this is when they're about ready to start choking me because I keep pushing them for more. What I want them to be able to do is one more thing, and if they can do this, they are ready. And that is, I want them to be able to give some kind of a fact or an example of that word that they either learned in a lecture or from their textbook. So I'll give you the little example here. The person says this, and then I ask them and they say it's a type of tax on what comes in or out of a country, and I say and they say, and I remember in our book it said that the United States imposed a tariff on Cuba in 1960. Some fact like that, okay? If you're able to do all of this, you're as ready as you're ever going to be, and it should be true that no matter how the teacher asks this on the test, no matter how they word it, shouldn't matter. You should be able to get it right because you know way more than just the words. I always tell people that I could find a child, if I could find one who's like 4 years old, and I could bring them in here and I could teach them this definition, and they'd probably learn it faster than anybody in here, and then they could be running around the room, and all of a sudden I'd say stop, and they'd be like this. And I say, tariff. They say, a system of duties on imports and exports. Good, go. And then they just keep running around. So they nailed it. They got it perfect. Does that mean they understand it? No, they just memorized a bunch of words. So some people get so excited when they can say the back of the card and they're thinking yes, but then problems occur. So if you go through the time it takes, whether it's just a minute or two or more with each word to be able to do all of these, that should mean you're ready to go when the test comes. Okay, any questions on this one? Okay, and is the sign-in sheet making it around? I got one more thing I want to go through. Okay, anybody miss signing it? Okay, I'll get that from you afterward. The last thing that I wanted to go through with you involves the use of a handout that is actually yours to just take with you and to read through on your own when you get a chance. I'm going to kind of hit some highlights of this, point out a couple of things to you for these last 5 minutes or so, and then I'll go ahead and send you on your way. And again, this has a lot of good information, even more than what I'm going to be able to explain. Let me give you a bunch more, and you can pass those back. Okay. Can you? Yeah. Thanks. Okay, on the front side of this handout, it talks about reasons why people forget. And then on the back, it gives ways to improve your memory. That's in addition to the things that I've talked about today. Well, I want to show you a couple of things on the front first, on the why we forget. Number one is a really obvious one, but it says negative self-concept. It says the people who are convinced that they cannot remember are most apt to forget. So when I work with a student and they're in a particular class and they show me all this that they have to learn, and I say, how are you going to learn that? And they say, I'm not. I can't learn that much. If they keep saying that and keep thinking that, guess what? They're never going to learn it. And so one of the ways to sort of fight that is to have confidence in your abilities. And if you feel, boy, I don't have any memory abilities, Well, that's what these workshops are about. That's what Learn 11 class is about, which I teach, and all that is to give you the strategies, but you have to develop confidence in your ability to remember. The third one on the list is also pretty obvious: disuse. Forgetting through disuse is both normal and unavoidable. The old saying is true: use it or lose it. So what I wanted to kind of remind everybody about, because I think you all know this, it's just most people don't do it, is to retain material, to hang on to it in your brain. You must engage in ongoing review and application. So when do most people review for a test? Yeah, right before. It might be like 10 minutes before, or it might be the night before, and maybe this is 3 weeks worth of lectures and the textbook. You're asking way too much of your brain by doing that. So what you need to do is review the night before, but it's not going back and dusting off these old memories from like 3 weeks ago. You should be doing it ongoing, 5 minutes at a time, 10 minutes another day, 5 minutes another day, just little bits of time just to keep it fresh in your mind. And then when the night before comes, it makes it so much easier. There's way less stress for you. Okay, and then number 4, I just wanted to point this out really quickly. What I just taught you about definitions is related to this. I didn't use the term changed cues. The problem, you may have all the information you need stored away in your mind, but be unable to recall it if the right cue is missing. In other words, if you study the material one way and the test questions presented in another, you may be unable to remember. So the way to fix that, again, is to work on learning things in your own words and not be so stiff with it that you're just trying to memorize the words on the card or on the sheet. Okay, and then the other thing, I wanted to show you a couple things on the back in this ways to improve your memory. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this term, but it says under number 1, match your memory approach to the material you need to learn. There are 2 basic ways to memorize. One is by rote. I don't know if you've heard that phrase before. That just means mechanically. The other one's by understanding. So everybody here, when you learned your times tables, your multiplication tables, I don't think you sat there and thought, 4 times 5. Now, that's interesting. Now, why would that be 20? You just memorized it, right? 4 times 5 is 20. 4 times 6 is 24. Just like mechanically over and over again. Some things in college, that's the way you should learn them. Other things, that's not the way you should learn them. And I've had some students memorize the factual information, and then they got to a test and the teacher asked them to show deep understanding of it, not just a quick little memorization. So you need to kind of double check with teachers and find out, am I supposed to just memorize this, or do I need to know more than just the words there? And they'll help you, they'll kind of guide you with that. And then the last thing, which may sound a little strange, and I don't want to ever ruin anybody's sleep in here, because sleep is so important. It says number 3, sleep on it. Review and refresh your memory before going to bed unless you are physically or mentally overtired. Freshly learned material is better remembered after a period of sleep than after an equal period of daytime activity when interference takes place. Now, if you are getting ready for bed and one eye is already closed and you can't even open it, or drool is starting to come down, don't study. Go to bed, okay? But if you're just tired, just regular tired, sometimes sitting and not studying hard or learning, but just reviewing for 10 or 15 minutes and then going to bed, it's not that you're going to dream about that all night, hopefully, but you have a tendency to remember more of that in the morning than you do if you learned it at 9 in the morning and tried to remember it like at 7 at night. Because during the day, you've got so many things going on that takes your mind away. When you're sleeping, things tend to just sort of hang there, and you are sometimes able to remember. And so the one exception to that I always say is math. Don't study math right before you go to bed, because then while you're sleeping, you're going to see numbers just floating in the air. That's a way to get a nightmare, so we don't want that. But just for regular subjects, that's good. We're all done, so thanks for coming again. Next week, memory tricks. Trick ways to memorize things, and that's always fun for me to teach, so hopefully I'll see you again.